Have you seen this? Have you seen David Lynch direct a Coen Brothers script?
Welcome to Have You Seen This?
The world's only podcast about obscure, overlooked, and misbegotten media.
All discussions will be spoiler heavy.
You have been warned.
This show would not be possible without the support of our patrons. If you would like to support our show, join us at patreon.com/haveyouseenthis. Patrons get the show a week early, and $5 supporters also get access to our Discord. Or you can tip us at our Ko-fi. Visit the link in the show notes.
Now, I'm cursed with a film bro education, so hence those two references. But for this episode, Jen has brought a guest to help us.
Yes, and we're very excited. This is a first-time guest, and we're very happy to have him. He is formerly of Deadspin, now of Defector. He writes about sports ball and politics ball. It's David J. Roth. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. How are you doing?
We are doing okay, all things considered.
Yeah,
as a time capsule, be like, I was doing great up until yesterday.
Yeah, I gotta be careful about asking people how they're doing. That is a reflex, and I need to pivot to something else.
Like, are you really asking me if I'm okay, or do you want me to get you caught up on how I'm not okay?
Yeah, I've been saying a lot of in response when I'm asked now.
Also, it is low-key ableist to ask people if they're doing okay, because sometimes you're talking to people who are on the spectrum, and they don't know not to take you at face value, and they will tell you how not okay they are in depth. But that's not a problem.
That's your mistake for asking. That's a you problem.
Yeah, well, look, I apologize. I'll go. I should go. I feel like I should go.
Well, we'll take it from here, because we have quite a problem tonight. It is, actually, this movie is very special, and this is possibly one of the best descriptions of any movie we have ever talked about on the show, is what David used to describe this movie to me when we first discussed having it as a show topic. The term that you coined was penis brain.
Yeah. I don't mean that like being a dickhead. I mean, like, what if your penis was your brain?
Yes, like your whole head is your glans penis somehow.
We're talking about Norman Mailer, of course.
Who else?
His 1987 film adaptation of his own novel.
Tough Guys Don't Dance.
Yeah, anybody read the novel?
I have not read the novel, but I've read about the novel. I wrote about this movie in the context of writing about the actor Wings Hauser for Defector. Well,
yes, which is why I asked you to appear on the show, because I was like, this guy knows what's what.
Yeah, there was a couple of people did. I mean, that was not. I think I'm not giving anything away. Not one of the most trafficked stories that has appeared on Defector.com.
No,
not a huge. But it's kind of, the whole thing about the Velvet Underground where it's like only 1,000 people bought that record, but they all went on to form bands. Like the 85 people that read that story were all like, fuck yeah, Wings Hauser, man. Like, wipe that smirk off your face. You're in the great state of Mississippi. Like, everyone's got a Wings Hauser, well, not everybody. Strange people have like a Wings Hauser performance that they hold on to and value. And
it's like that Chick tract where it's like, people hated him for his message.
Yeah. that was me trying to bring the good word of Wings Hauser to the people. The reason I wrote about Wings Hauser, I should say, because it's not usually what I write about. Although I would love to get more Wings Hauser into the the diet if I could, just as a mental roughage. We did a theme week. We do this sometimes at Defector, where usually during slow periods of the sports season. This one was during the Major League Baseball All-Star break. There were a number of, and there's not a lot of sports happening in the summertime. This was a period of time where there was like 3 days where basically nothing happened. Like, unless you wanted to write about the home run derby or the ESPYs, there was just not a blessed thing. And so the theme that we came up with was Wings Week. And so it was some blogs about the Detroit Red Wings and some blogs about birds. And then, there's only one actor named Wings Hauser.
Yeah.
As far as I know, there's the only one actor named Wings is him. And that is a name he made up for himself. And so I knew a little bit about, like, I'd seen some performances of his, but I knew that he had in the 80s this incredibly, I don't think productive is exactly the word for it. He was extremely busy.
Busy, yeah.
And in a lot of movies that like I knew from my time working in a video store, like I knew his name without having seen anything that he did. Because there's a lot of those like kind of like sub Carolco action movies where there's like maybe the cover of the VHS box is like drawn, you know, like instead of painted or whatever.
By someone's
He'd
nephew.
done a lot of, yes. Yeah. He'd done a lot of action movies, and he's not like what you would call like a conventionally handsome or like action star guy.
Oh,
he's
no,
an
no,
extremely,
no.
extremely committed actor and an extremely weird performer. And so this movie I basically picked because I'd always been curious about it. It was on streaming. And I knew from having watched the trailer in the past that he was fucking getting after it performance wise in it. And so in order to basically like have something to pad out my story so that it was more than like, did you know there is an actor whose name is Wings? I watched this movie and took notes, and that was like months ago, but I feel like I'm still pretty fresh on it because it is sincerely one of the most tonally baffling movies that I've ever seen.
It is fucking wild, and we will get to that. But first I want to ask, did anybody write about the band Wings on the site?
We didn't. You know, what was funny is one of those things where we kind of talked about it and we're like, well, someone could. And I think it was kind of like I got it, you take it, pop up falling between three infielders sort of scenario. Like, I just don't think anybody was really willing to step up and do it. And so, I think it's
malicious compliance of writing a Wings Hauser article for Wings Week.
Yeah, it's also true to form for me. Like the last story that went up on the site that week, like it published at, again, not that anyone should think that I was scrambling for clicks on it. I think it went up at like 4:51 p.m. on Friday afternoon. Like, yeah, I'm actually looking at it now. 3:57, pretty early for me for a Friday, actually. But it's not the most of, like whatever. I knew that there only weirdos were going to read it, and that was how it worked out.
Well, this is definitely a podcast for weirdos, so you're in the right place. And to jump off of your Velvet Underground reference, I believe that the 30 or 40 people who listen to this show will be very gratified to hear us discuss the movie.
Well, a lot of this is how we wound up in touch, is that like several people like tagged you in after I published that blog and were like, yo, you should, like, you're going to want to read this. And
yeah,
we've all got our brands.
We all got the same brain worms. I appreciate too you mentioning the Carolco angle, because just watching the credits, like the opening credits of Tough Guys Don't Dance, is wild to see all the talent involved.
Oh, it's so overqualified. So here's what I can tell you about the book. I think I got sidetracked on this. It's considered like a minor work among minor works for Mailer, that it was basically a book that he wrote in the same way that Marvin Gaye famously recorded the album Here, My Dear as like
for alimony purposes.
For alimony. And this was something similar, apparently.
So writing songs for Coke.
Yes. Like so this was basically like Mailer's equivalent of that. Like just basically like doing the George Plimpton what's the like Atari commercials, like just being like, I need money now. I have a structured settlement and I need cash now. And so he did that. And then the decision to make it a movie is the only thing he's ever directed. And
not true. There was a movie in 1970 that he made called Maidstone, or maybe I should say Maidstone. Sorry, that's my Rob Halford voice. Yeah, it was a weird kind of like I can't like say hippie, but like sort of like avant-garde collaborative sort of thing, which I think was on Criterion for a while.
Right, you are.
And I can't speak to the quality of the movie, although honestly it does kind of sound like shit.
Oh,
but
this is incredible 70s shit. I'm looking at the cast right now. Mailer's in it.
Yes.
Rip Torn playing a character named Raoul. Joy Bang is in it. Perfect.
Yes.
This is one of the most 1970 endeavors imaginable.
Yes, and if one is motivated to seek it out, it is available in full on YouTube. But at the very least, watch the scene where Rip Torn attacks Norman Mailer with a hammer. Like,
is it real?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes,
Well,
and it will not surprise you to hear that they got into a real fight on the set or in like the big field that they were shooting in, because Mailer famously pugilistic.
That energy, the idea of him as being like two-fisted man of letters, hard drinking, hard loving, like in 1970, I think that was kind of like a cool way to be. By the time you get to 1987, it's not like the culture was in a great place, right? Like I was alive in 1987. I was a child, but I knew that things were not good. I won't presume that either of you guys was alive during that period, but maybe
we were.
Weren't. All right.
So yeah. I was watching Transformers and G.I. Joe, and
yeah,
I was up on popular culture.
Yeah, so kind of passively absorbing some of the most psychotic cultural propaganda ever devised.
Hey, but Reagan likes jelly beans.
That was cool. I like them too.
Yeah, he's a guy like me.
Yeah, he's a guy you'd want to have a Capri Sun with.
Yeah.
I would love to see his astrologer.
Oh, yeah, I mean, honestly, that's like kind of like in the same way that you can appreciate things from that era of being like, well, that's a little dated. You can still, the idea of being like a presidential astrologer, for one thing, like we are trending back in that direction. Like I have no difficulty imagining that we will be alive to see a second one of those.
Yeah. But, I mean, RFK Jr. is right there.
I know. It's incredible. What a cool thing to think about. Moving on.
I feel like we're preoccupied with other topics.
We were talking about the general pugnaciousness of Mailer.
Yeah. So 87, he's like at a different spot in his career. And he would go on to live longer, but he had basically written the last book that he would ever write that anybody gave a shit about years earlier. And this movie has like kind of like a weird one-off, I guess you could say it's like an auteurist statement or whatever. It's strange because it's like an incredibly minor work. In the sense that it's like there's really nothing you can take away from it beyond how strange it is, and yet like for all the vanity projects of that period and then later that I've sort of sat through, including movies directed by novelists, which are generally among the most inert cultural products imaginable, it is beautifully made. It moves, like it has the performances are variable but always entertaining, and like except for the fact that the movie is kind of rancid in a lot of ways, it's kind of good. Do you know what I mean? Like moment to moment, it is competent in a way that like surprised me, even though, as we've established, like it is penis brained in ways that I struggled to get my head around, even going in with the expectations that I did.
Yeah, it does keep moving, and it does have a central mystery to it that Mailer does parse out responsibly to keep you engaged in the story, because as events kind of tend to unravel, you realize that sort of the inciting incident has nothing to do with, like the actual like motivations going on like behind the scenes that we aren't privy to. The more you uncover, the less it looks like what it initially looks like, if that makes sense.
Yeah. But like, again, to underline it crucially, not really in a very interesting way. Like it's not this sort of thing.
Well, like, we can't have it all.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
it
comes like across as, I mean, I can't speak to the source novel, but it I guess you could kind of classify this as neo-noir. That was a thing in the 70s and 80s. It is pulpy. It's watchable, but in the way that you watch something and you're like, I really don't know how to take this, because it's so out there to the point where it's not, and it doesn't fall into the category of outsider art, because Mailer definitely had like a real crew. He had talented actors, many of which were kind of floundering in that milieu, like judging by their performances, but they do their best. Fucking Francis Ford Coppola was a producer on this. This was associated with Zoetrope.
Music by Angelo Badalamenti. Photographed by John Bailey.
Yeah.
Uncredited rewrite by Robert Towne.
That's
on the screenplay,
right.
According
Robert
to
Towne
IMDb.
is thanked at the in the end credits, like special thanks. Probably like a very, very light revisions, I'm guessing. Although on the other hand, Robert Towne did write The Two Jakes. So
Yeah.
Maybe he was just having an off decade. I'm not sure.
Yep.
And then finally, too, like produced by Golan Globus.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was the thing that really threw me.
And it does fit into the very deranged oeuvre.
Speaking of like 80s toxicity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because a lot of...
When you see that Canon Films logo...
Yeah.
You know it's about to go down.
Oh, you're getting something completely penis-brained. Just look at Death Wish 3.
Yeah, so this is like a prestige swing for them. Because as I think of them mostly as being like the Stallone movie Cobra, I associate with them.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, again, like kind of weird, fashy 80s artifacts with like big stars and fast cars.
Yeah,
and,
a lot of Charles Bronson movies that you can't quite remember the name of, but you've like seen on cable once or twice.
Did they do Kinjite Forbidden Subjects?
Yeah, which we talked about on the show.
Did you actually?
Yes.
Yeah.
I know the names of all these movies because Chenley Levin, which was the local, like just basically over the air station, used to just show a movie every night. New York's movie station, WPIX, RIP. It's now just like, whatever, CW or some shit. And they would just have like Charles Bronson weeks. And they would advertise them as such. Like it was like that was an attraction. Like they would be like, we're doing them all. Like we're going to do Mr. Majestic at 8 p.m. tonight. Like, you want to watch this. All the Death Wishes, Monday to Friday. So I knew like Kinjite and I knew it from the video store, but I have not seen a minute of it.
Oh, it is really something. I think I described it as it's like if your uncle who says slurs sometimes tried being woke.
Oh, it's like he's like a rescuing character in that, or is
because it is about
human trafficking by the widely Japanese who like own everything now.
Yeah, like there's
a great time for opinions on Japanese people.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, like there's a salary man in it who like just like touches strange women on public transport because that's what they do, right?
Oh, they love doing that.
Right.
I read it in the paper. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, Bronson is, the kind of cop he always plays, which is like basically a violent psychopath, but that's good, right? You want somebody who doesn't fuck around.
But he's right. Yeah.
I remember reading Roger Ebert's reviews of one of the Death Wishes, which he hated. That was like the way I basically got into movies, was reading the big Roger Ebert like doorstop review book.
Yes.
And there was one of those movies where he was like, Bronson says like 150 words in this whole movie. And I think there was like a lot of the 80s ones, he would just basically show up and be like, I'm not talking today. And they'd be like, all right, you got it.
Yeah, pretty much. And like, I think the reason that the local station you mentioned could do like these big like Bronson weeks is because it's like, hey, it's Charles Bronson. You know exactly what you're getting when you see that name on the box or the poster or the marquee. And people would tune in for that.
Yeah, kind of like on B-Movie TV, there's that actor who looks like Charles Bronson. They're making like fake
Robert
Charles Bronson movies with him.
Yeah.
It's all like these vanity projects.
Yeah, there's like there's a fake
weird ass
Bronzy and he's a fake Bronson, and he's been in like a fake Death Wish and a fake Charles Bronson Western. It's fascinating. But
who are these for? These are like the kind of
I assume he's just another Tommy Wiseau type.
Oh my gosh. It's fantastic also that his name is very similar. I'm gonna look him up. Yeah, there he is. Yep. Robert Bronzy.
He looks just like him too.
Hungarian-born performer Robert Bronzy is a world-traveled actor and he really does look like him. But again, it's also like there's kind of a lot of people that look like Charles Bronson. That was like what was always weird to me about how successful he was.
Well,
anyone who's like gotten too much sun and too much plastic surgery, I think. You're halfway there.
Like, are you a functional alcoholic with facial hair? You're 70% of the way there.
I mean, it certainly explains a lot of B movies, and to kind of jump off of Tim's frame of reference for B movies, which is
such as it is,
16 hours a day of B movie TV. I know, Tim, you've seen a lot in the Wings Hauser canon, so this should be interesting.
More than I care to, yes.
Right.
Yeah. So what did I miss? I know there's one where he plays a pimp and it's a legendarily deranged performance, and he recorded a song that plays over the end credits called Neon Slime. but I don't remember what that movie is called. I'd have to look up my own story to find it.
Well, that sounds like it's worth seeking out. There are some that I'm familiar from Riff Tracks. There is Mutant. There's oh God, what's that one with?
There's there are mostly ones where it's him like as a cop close to the edge, or like a private investigator close to the edge, or a detective close to the edge. I don't know. But like Cold Fire was one of them. Like No Safe Haven was another one. Shoot.
Vice Squad is the one where he plays a pimp named Ramrod.
Wilding, I think, was another. It looked like it was supposed to be the pilot for a TV show.
Yeah,
movie.
I actually had fun doing the movie version of remembering some guys. I'm looking at the story now where I was just writing down the names of some of the movies he was in. There's like 2 paragraphs of me just putting in Wings Hauser credits, and they are all like, if you were somebody that walked through like a video store at any time during the 80s and 90s, there's going to be like some whatever the opposite of like Proust's Madeline Reverie is. Like, you're going to see Beastmaster 2 through the portal of time and be like, wow,
hell
yes, I'm there and I don't like it.
Such is the canon of Wings Hauser, and this is certainly a worthy entry. Like I was saying before, you can't class it as an outsider film because the production value is extremely high. It's certainly a very high value cast, but it's so, I just, rewatching it, I just got the impression that as crazy as the shit that happens in it, I'm like, I bet like 85% of this like actually happened to Norman Mailer.
This happened to my buddy Eric. Yeah, this does have the feeling, or just the sort of thing, if there was like one story about like the production of it, I would like to read it.
Yeah.
Like, I would probably read that story happily for as long as the runtime of this film is. Probably more happily than watching.
I prefer that over the movie.
Yeah. And I had a little bit of a tough time with this one. Like, there is a story and it does move, and like there is a central mystery, but all the times I've seen it, I just find myself getting like completely lost. And the thing is, when David Lynch makes a movie centering around mysterious women, at least he makes one of them a brunette. Like, here we got...
Well, this does have Isabella Rossellini in it.
Oh, that's true. But but then there are these 2 somewhat interchangeable blondes. And
there's Patty and what's her name? Like
Selma.
Stephanie or something? Yeah.
Jessica.
Selma.
Jessica, the triple X porn star.
Yeah.
Played by Frances.
Who opens with that?
Love that little bit of like, I'm a porn star, triple X. Like, none of the like the way that you might ask somebody to call you doctor if you had a PhD.
Yeah, like somebody tells you like, oh, I'm in adult films, and you go softcore, and they're like, no, full penetration. No. Thank you very much.
Yes. Yeah. So there's a lot of I think that when we say penis brained, everybody understands what that term means.
We've all been there.
Yes, but and so the men in this movie are all psychotic and obsessed with their own penises and sexual vitality.
And
the
not
women
being
in
a
it,
faggot.
on the other hand, yes, and but the women in it are like some of the like. I don't even really know that like sexist is the word for it. Like, they're dames. They're all very horny and very scheming.
They're sort of out of the like Frank Miller central casting.
Yes. Yeah. I was going to say that it's like beyond, like, archetype isn't even really like a thing there. Like, in terms of it, they're just sort of like caricatures of caricatures from the mind of somebody who thinks only of having sex with women, but has basically no other frame of reference for what they might be like or want.
Yeah. Like,
who would even ask such a ridiculous question?
Yeah.
Norman Mailer makes like a James Ellroy novel look like something by Margaret Atwood. It is
That's what I was gonna say.
wild. And all these women are extremely well-rounded characters. Not like the men are so well-rounded, and I think
right.
It's probably
well-rounded like tits, right?
Woo!
Yeah. Oh
yeah.
Very well-rounded.
And there are titties in this, so enjoy. But the thing that
to get
came
through all
to
the
mind,
talky parts, right?
Yeah, like honest, I was just waiting for the titties, bro. The thing that came to mind when I was watching this again was, and it's going to sound crass, but I think some of you will know what I mean when I say that all of these female characters seem like they were molested at an early age.
In the sense that they have like completely psychotic sexualities that are wrecking their lives.
Yeah, like they literally had no frame of reference for normal adult sexuality. And I'm saying this with compassion because, and I think that's something which kind of gets like overlooked a lot in these kinds of portrayals of women. I think feminists are quite right to critique them, and certainly Norman Mailer got a lot of flack from feminists, but there's often the grain of real experience in these. And I do kind of feel that because, Mailer himself was married like, I don't know, like 6 times. Famously
times.
Stabbed his wife.
Married annually.
At a dinner party because she called him a faggot. And took heat for it, as he rightly...
hit dog howls, huh?
Yeah, as he rightly should have for many years after the fact. And there's also there's a documentary about him, which is pretty recent, and I cannot remember the name of it. I'll link it in the show notes. I really want to call it How to Be a Cool Fucking Guy, but that's not actually the name of it, although it should be. But it's a pretty good like crash course on Mailer. And quite a few of the women in his life speak of him with affection and caring and are generally positive, even though I would imagine being in a relationship with this guy is a nightmare. And I think that's somewhat reflected in the way that he writes women, to the point where I'm like, okay, like, Norm, like, when do you admit that this is like a you problem? Like, if you meet assholes all day, don't you start to wonder if the asshole is actually you?
Yeah, if you're only marrying women that are too crazy to be married to anyone, like,
right,
maybe you're not.
Yeah,
actually, like maybe this is insight is not, it's not a Norman Mailer thing. And in this case, I mean, this movie is like kind of the opposite of it. Like, it's interesting to see if you think of the women as basically being sort of, and I don't have a hard time believing this at all, as being sort of like reflections of either the women in his life, or more probably accurately, a reflection of how he saw them.
Yeah.
Which is as these sort of archetypal Madonna whore binary types. That the rest of it, I mean, I think if you see Ryan O'Neal's main character, who is tough guy, ex-con, kind of a brawler, kind of brooding, mysteriously nice house, and like a little bit of an artist, but a little bit of like a ruffian too, that like obviously that sounds like Norman Mailer imagining himself. And then Wings Hauser as being this psychotic cop, and
ex-Green Beret,
authoritarian psychopath, and if you take his word for it, an unbelievable sexual dynamo who has had sex with every woman in town. That is also probably a reflection of like either the way that Mailer sees himself, or as being like a cool, dangerous type of guy to be.
Yeah, I think that Wings Hauser's character brags that he like fucks his wife like 5 times a night.
Yeah.
Which, just totally normal amount.
It's weird too, because Isabel Rossellini says, like, her character says, "Oh, we make out 5 times a day," which to me maybe sounds like a slightly fluffed line that they just left in, because it's like, oh, like you kiss with tongue 5 times a day. Yep. Oh my God.
He gets under my shirt 5 times a day.
We get to second base every day.
He touches my boobs.
She also has some like where she's like, he's a piece of shit, but I like him. Like that sort of, which again is the sort of thing where you can feel Mailer being like, I think that's something that a lady would say about a cool guy. For instance, all of my wives say it about me. So
yeah, that is 100% correct. Like,
so, yeah, well cast. Not just these two, but also Penn Jillette in a small role. Like, that seems appropriate.
Big stoop. Doing what Penn Jillette does in real life, I think. Not the preaching, but definitely the group sex.
Yes.
Well, pointing with the horns, with the first and with his index finger and his pinky finger. He's been doing that since then.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah.
He taught Paulie Walnuts how to do it.
And and that's another like brief plot cul-de-sac that I want to mention, because the way that they come across this preacher played by a somewhat youthful Penn Jillette is that one day Ryan O'Neal's character, who's named Tim, funnily enough.
Don't trust a guy named Tim.
His name is Tim and he dates crazy broads. That's weird. Anyway,
Wouldn't know anything about it.
So Ryan O'Neal's character is sitting around talking to his wife at the time, Isabel Rossellini.
He's reading like Screw magazine.
You beat me to it. He says, I was just looking at the pages of Screw and I found this ad. It's an 8-hour drive
articles
to North Carolina to like, hey, let's go fuck this other couple.
This is how they used to have to do it, man. Now you can do all the hot wife stuff. It all happens on Reddit.
That's
back in the day,
/hot wife.
You had to send Al Goldstein $20 for a typewritten thing. You put it in a fucking magazine perverts read.
Not to repeat myself, but I could absolutely see Norman Mailer paging through Screw magazine one night and saying like, fuck it. Maybe I could
I could
get a novel out of this. And
right.
making his
like, I'm doing this for work.
Yeah.
It's a tax write-off.
Hey, it's called the new journalism.
Yep.
Which it was at the time, or in the 60s.
Yeah, I forgot that this is basically so like the relationship, the way that Tim meets the woman Patty, who's one of the aforementioned dizzy dames in it, is like basically prehistoric sex tourism.
Before they had a name for it.
Yeah.
Like, it's so wild to imagine like when people would like meet other people to fuck through like ads in like physical media, like
print media. Yeah,
that's very funny. But yeah, but that's kind of the it's reflective of the way this movie is, which is like absolutely insane situations that don't necessarily happen to people like you and me, but they definitely happen to people like Norman Mailer. And I do feel that this is later in Mailer's career. I don't even remember when his first novel was published. It was Naked and the Dead in like the early 50s or something like that. Yeah. And he had long since settled into the position of, established voice, and like a bit of a countercultural one, like in the 60s and 70s. Like he ran for New York mayor, he protested the Vietnam War, like he debated feminists, at dueled with Gore Vidal on the Dick Cavett show, which is a very funny clip, and I also recommend seeking that out. So I think this is Mailer able to sort of take stock of himself as like a man and a writer. And I think quite a bit of this is like tongue in cheek to a degree. I just think that he doesn't have like the grasp of cinema that another director would, that in order to completely put this across, which is why it comes across as sort of like weird schlock, and the tone is so uneven, because a lot of it is like genuinely funny, and there's no way you can look at, for example, like Wings Hauser's character and not think like, oh, like, yeah, this is definitely like a joke about something. But
an unhinged weirdo.
Yeah, but the beginning of the film, you're kind of not sure, because when Ryan O'Neal...
Yeah, are we watching like Ordinary People or something?
Yeah. Like Ryan O'Neal walks into the room and starts talking to his father, played by Lawrence Tierney, and the dialogue is like a parody. Like if you said like, oh, write me what you think a Norman Mailer pen scene would sound like, I'd be like, I don't know, it's probably guys talking about like prisons and not being gay and like their dicks and stuff.
It is basically like has his dad over for coffee, and he's like, the dad's like, I'm glad you're out of prison, and he's like, I wasn't anybody's punk, and he's like, good.
He's like so legitimately pleased. Like,
chopping it up with Dad.
And the acting is like, it's not bad, but there's a weird stiltedness to it that I don't think you would get with another director.
Yeah. Or a director.
Yeah.
A film director.
Right. Not just like a writer moonlighting.
Yeah, Norman Mailer's being kind of the alpha and omega of writers here, because on the one hand, he is sticking to the adage, write what you know, of just like penis-brained, action with dames. But then on the other hand, you got the advice that is rewrite your novel until it doesn't sound like writing, and so much of every scene in this sounds like writing.
Yes, it's very writerly. Big.
Although, in a way that it is, you're completely correct, and it is often oafish and kind of laughable, and yet, and I guess this is just a reflection of like the sort of relative dearth of legitimately strange cultural products that we have right now. I think there's fewer movies being made, and there's certainly fewer movies like this being made. There was a part of me that kind of appreciated it because of the fact that even though it didn't work, and it mostly does not work, that it's distinctive, like it is like the way that, like, if you were making wine in your toilet in prison, you could still describe it as having like terroir, or like any of the ways that you might describe actual wine that was made from grapes. And like, this is a very, like, it's toilet wine, but it is like made by a master, or at least by somebody who's a committed craftsman in that way. Like, it has all of
it's
the
a good
texture
vintage. Yes.
Yeah. The acting, I think that what's interesting about it, because you mentioned Lawrence Tierney, and I think he gives probably the best performance in the movie. I think it's actually a very good performance.
Yeah, he's great, actually.
But I feel like a lot of the actors, like, effectively, they're not directed, is the way that I sort of wound up thinking about it. And so what you get are like, it's a question of how they are as performers. And so, you get that different version from each of them. The women go big. O'Neill seems a little confused, which is like, it fits the character, but it's also kind of, he's not naturally like a hammy guy like that. Like, he's kind of just like a graying himbo.
It's a very Ryan O'Neil-y performance.
Yeah. And then Hauser and John Bedford Lloyd, who plays a kind of like Truman Capote-ish fop, in a, like, again, pretty backwards, like a pretty caricatured sort of Tennessee Williams-y Southern homosexual man.
Yeah, like the kind of character where you're like, do I need to
just
look
Foghorn Leghorn voice?
Yes. Well, like, but the thing that character made me think of was like, I was like, do I need to like go through like back issues of Vanity Fair to figure out what this is about? Because that's kind of what it feels like, and that's the best way I can think of to explain it.
Litigating some sort of beef with Dominic Dunn or whatever.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
That's between you guys. I don't need to know about this shit. Like, that's, but so Lloyd and Hauser are effectively just doing whatever, seemingly anyway, whatever comes to mind. And those performances, I wound up being sort of my favorite ones in the movie, because it's like, Hauser, evidently did this a lot because he was in so many just shoestring kind of cheesy B-movie performances, where the writing is real writing, but it is overstated, and they kind of meet it where it is in a way where they're just like, it's not a sort of performance that you would see in any other movie. Like, I can't think of, even by Wings Hauser standards, he's doing stuff with his head and body in this, and I'm just sort of like, no one told you not to do that, but also like, it's amazing that you thought this was like a thing to do.
And strangely, it's the one performance that I think like really fits the movie, because I think everyone else seems like they're laboring under the assumption that it's like, oh, we're making a real movie, right? Like, this is like a drama. Like, this is a noir. Wings Hauser just like cranks up the dial and like enjoys himself. And I think probably like coming out of that B movie milieu, like I really hate that thing that people say on social media, he understood the assignment, but that's kind of what's going on here.
Yeah, I think that's right. It is
Wings'
like
performance takes flight.
I do think that the idea of like understanding the assignment, when people usually say it, online, it's always like someone has like good hair in a photograph, like it has nothing to do with like any sort of artistic discernment. Whereas I think in this case, like it is a rare example of him like delivering a performance that is formally as batshit as the text that he is working off of. And I worry that we're like struggling to convey it to a certain extent. We just keep saying how strange it is. There's like super cuts out there. He's even just the trailer that you can watch on IMDb. He is, operating at about like a 13 out of 10 in that. And you can see it. Like, it's worth checking out. Like, it is legitimately one of the stranger performances I've seen in any movie.
Yeah. Well, it fits with what you're saying, because there's a point too where you're like, is this Wings like the performer, or is this like Wings the person? Like, what are we getting?
Right?
Yeah. So it's like, is he being weird because he's weird, or because he thinks this is what the role demands?
At some point, I don't know, it's a distinction without a difference or whatever. But yes, I do think that there's something to that, because the other performance of his that I sort of singled out, well, beyond the his one scene in The Insider, which is like probably how most people would recognize him now, or people that care about movies anyway, that the performance in it's like a vanity project made by a guy who it's not exactly like a Robert Bronzy sort of scenario, but it's not really super far from that. It's I'm trying to find the actual name of the movie. It has like a number of different names.
That's always a good sign when you look up something on IMDb and it's like also known as.
Yes. So Champagne and Bullets, original title Road to Revenge. And it's this guy, this doofus named John D. Hart, who is basically like,
oh God, yes. Yeah, sorry, so continue.
No, so I mentioned in my story that John DeHart looks like if Beavis's dad was like a real guy. Like, it's not a movie star profile in the least. But
he does sex scenes, folks.
Oh gosh, yeah, he sings in it. It's a real crazy movie. It has like a cult following. Like, Nathan Rabin wrote about it. Like, it
was covered on Best of the Worst on Red Letter Media.
Yeah, like it's definitely like a text that people find, and Hauser is in that in a couple of scenes, and it's a similar sort of performance to this, where the material is poor. He is acting against a non-professional actor who seems like he's like 6 inches shorter than him and won't make eye contact with him. Like, just the worst imaginable scene partner. And so Hauser just decides again to be like, I'm going to score 50 points and win my team this basketball game. And there are clips of his performances from that on YouTube that have like hundreds of thousands of views.
Yeah, Tim, I think I showed you the clip that one of the clips they used in that Red Letter Media video, which is Wings Hauser at a bar, like demanding a drink, just completely shit-faced. And you're like, wait, like, I think he himself might actually be shit-faced.
Yep. It is like, you do kind of have to wonder about it there, but it is whatever. I appreciate
to the role. Yeah.
It's cool though. Like, again, like, I'm not going to watch the actual movie, but I did watch the highlight thing more than, like, once for the story and then once to be like, let's run it back. Like, I want to see that man's weird head moving around like that again.
Yeah, that particular movie, I have not seen it myself. I've only seen Red Letter Media's presentation of it. And it does appear to be dire for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah.
But getting back to Tough Guys Don't Dance, I was almost looking forward to having 2 other people on the line who could kind of explain the plot to me, because I was really struggling.
I can explain most of the plot.
There's a bunch of murder. There's a cocaine deal. There's $2 million.
Mm-hmm. Well, you find out the whole thing, like, you find the whole thing out like in reverse, basically. And there is a part of it that makes sense of Wings setting up Tim as the fall guy for a drug deal that kind of went sour, because Tim has a history, like he's been in jail, and you were last seen with the 2 deceased, so he's probably the guy who did it. And it's just Wings as the entrenched police chief, the police chief with his entrenched power base, ACAB,
Mhm.
just finding a drifter to be like, oh yeah, he killed these two people. Fry him, whatever. I'm going back to dealing coke. But yeah, then as the movie winds on and like has like flashbacks and digressions and explanations of digressions and cul-de-sacs, it's a really
Yeah.
confused story. So
Yeah.
yeah, you could be forgiven for not being able to follow all of it.
Yeah, and
and it
that's
does
another thing
takes
about
a lot of detours, definitely, like in ways that are not even necessarily like compelling, like fake outs or MacGuffins or whatever. It's just sort of like it
Yeah,
feels like Mailer wanted to write another scene for the whatever, the Truman Capote guy, and so he did.
Well, and a lot of it too is like, well, it's me, Ryan O'Neal, and I'm hanging out with Patty. Okay, well, first I got to explain who Patty is. Okay, well, Patty is leaving me. Okay, well, the way I met Patty was I was her chauffeur. Well, let me back up. I was in jail. It's like, all right, well, where are we in the story now?
Yeah, and the thing is that I think because Mailer not being like a career filmmaker so much, like it's not exactly like, when you watch a movie like Primer, you feel like that particular filmmaker like mapped out what happened in the movie with an elaborate flow chart. And he knew
Yeah,
exactly where all the pieces fit.
this is more of like a bath salts Christopher Nolan.
Yeah, it is, and that's as I recall in Ebert's review of this, which he was not very positive about it. He was like, "This it doesn't make sense." He's like, "It doesn't add up." Like I charted it out. There's a couple of like real big holes in it, and ordinarily I don't have any patience for that sort of like plot hole discourse or whatever.
The
It's just like,
cinema sins bullshit.
Yeah, it's kind of like either you're on board with it or you're not.
yeah.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's like I feel like for all of the stunting on it that we've combined to do over the first 50 minutes of this podcast, I would have been on board for it. It becomes like not just like difficult to follow, but like effectively impossible to follow because the cul-de-sacs kind of collapse on each other. And I think if you were to say, because this is, Tim was blacked out, he'd had like a bender, there's all this kind of classic noir shit again, where it's like he doesn't remember. All of this is the sort of thing that like it could work. Like there have been movies where this premise more or less works. This is just not that. Like I think he's got the tropes and he's got the sort of beats he wants to hit, but he never organizes it in any
Yeah, it's
way.
like all these pieces
like,
should fall into place. If I have enough pieces, eventually they'll all work, right?
Exactly. Right. Like
Yeah.
it's sort of like assembling every like bit of a jigsaw on a table before you and being like, perfect, we have all of them. I've solved this puzzle.
Yeah, and I also
It's all there,
feel
folks.
like
You work it out.
Yep.
I also feel like maybe to a novelist, like this kind of fast and loose messing around with time might be a little more, I don't know, accessible. Like on film, it just is incredibly confusing.
Yeah. Whereas I read books like this all the time. It's one of my favorite genres of book. I don't know if it counts as a genre, but my wife calls them your little books. These little short books from a lot of them from like the novelist Leonardo Sciascia wrote a bunch of these, like sort of like kind of like mysteries, but like they're not really mysteries, and in a lot of cases they don't really resolve. It's just, and there's like fables about fucked up post-fascist or Years of Lead style Italy, or
Ooh.
Patrick Modiano's books, which are basically about feeling sad in Paris and remembering a time when you were younger. I love that shit.
Anytime someone says Years of Lead, it intrigues me.
Yes. And these
you can write books about that?
Yes. The Sciascia books rock. Highest recommendation. Modiano, you'll know right away if it's for you or not, because they are pretty like dreamy and French. But I don't mind a mystery that doesn't resolve at all if it's a book. In a movie, though, I have different expectations for it to a certain extent.
Right.
Yeah, unless it's something that like is kind of more in the, I don't know, DNA of it, where it's just like, yeah, this is kind of, if that's like your takeaway from it, where it's like, forget it, Jake, it's Chinatown, just off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
Where, yeah, if you can understand like this is the point of the movie, but that's not the point of Tough Guys Don't Dance. It's just sloppy work.
Yep.
Yeah, and if you take something like The Big Sleep, which famously doesn't make any sense if you think about it for longer than 30 seconds.
The sleep wasn't even that big.
No.
Yeah.
Like
it's a red herring.
Yeah, like you can kind of hand wave that a little bit because of the quality of the film. And I won't even say that this movie is bad so much as it is just weird. Like a lot of the
It's
stuff
strange.
we talk about on the show, it is fucking weird. And I think, David, your toilet wine analogy is a perfect encapsulation of a lot of the shit we talk about on this show.
Yeah. And I think that that's like a good type of movie. It's a type of movie that I feel like I miss in a lot of ways. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know that obviously you all are more on top of this than me. And so you probably are finding newer ones. And I know that there are some that have sort of like broken contain things that were like, you know, made for undiscerning audiences by, you know, producers that didn't care, that still wound up being kind of distinctive and weird.
Mhm.
The ones that I've read about, I watched a little bit of one of them, are those the later Universal Soldier movies with like Scott Adkins in them.
Oh wow.
And
they're not even about like the same Universal Soldier
no
anymore.
But they're
Yeah.
incredibly violent, incredibly stylish, and like weird, you know, like it's the sort of thing where basically they got some money to make something based off this IP because they thought that they'd be able to, you know, put it in a red box, and the people that were making it made a real movie. Like it might not be good, but it is like they put their backs into it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that there's stuff like that out there that falls through the cracks and I don't know about it, but I feel like the video stores of my youth, if I can sound 1,000 years old to you for a moment, like I feel like it was all stuff like this. That like a lot of stuff that was made direct to video,
straight
but then
to video.
also it was like, you know, there was more money for somebody to go make some like Canadian tax shelter movie with a bunch of guys in it, and every, you know, now and then one of those would really hit and be like colorful and fascinating.
Yeah, well, it was every, you know, rise and grind mindset. You know, don't let perfect be the enemy of done kind of director out there, being like, this is what we have to work with, but it's done, it's on video, and you know we can make, you know, $80 a unit.
Mm-hmm.
Your Bill
Selling
Rebane's,
whatever
your
this is.
Charles B. Pierce's.
Right.
Auteurs is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it really is true. Like, you don't get big wild swings on this scale anymore because it's not like this movie is just like a cheap piece of crap. Like I said, real actors, real production design, like real
Great
camera
locations,
people. Yeah.
proper photography. Yeah.
And on film, like people don't
Yeah.
spend on that kind of thing anymore.
Yeah, this is a real difference that, you know, again, like nothing new to you all, but that like I watched this movie, you know, at like basically for work, but I had been on this kick of movies at around that time during the summer of movies. I was really into films where New York City looks like shit, like movies from the 70s and 80s.
Oh yeah.
Where everything's just kind of like brown and broken and fucked up looking.
Grubby, yeah.
Yeah. I guess we can psychoanalyze off air why I was feeling like I needed to be watching those movies at that time. But there was
Who can say?
just the value that you get from that level of like, I guess the care that you have to bring to shooting on film because every frame of it costs money. Like they just, even the shitty ones look different and feel different. Like they feel like real movies in a way that I like think of movies as looking.
There's still kind of a baseline regardless of what you're actually watching. You're like,
Yeah.
well, this looks like a real movie. It's as close to a real movie as it was able to get.
Yeah. Because they couldn't do it cheaper than they did. You know, like
Yeah.
the technology was not available for them. I guess you could have like shot it direct on VHS, Jack Horner style, but nobody was really doing
Oh,
it.
we've covered a few of those.
You can make film history right here on videotape.
Real movie.
Yeah, filmmaking on actual film, which has a lot to do with why the filmmaking on actual film has a lot to do with why this movie looks good, even though it's so determinedly strange. The other thing,
It's almost inscrutable. Like even just the tough guys don't dance. Like what kind of aphorism is that? What are we supposed to get out of that? Because it's stated up front.
yeah, and this
But
movie
even that
is jam packed with that kind of aphorism.
There's a lot of moments where it seems like he's kind of like gesturing as confidently as you could gesture in like some broader either metaphysical or the masculinity, cultural, whatever, like some sort of like a sense of either an attempt at a critique or a big statement, and it is just very hard to parse. The scene from this, I've opened with this. Everybody, even if you haven't seen this movie, you have probably seen, it's like a meme thing of Ryan O'Neal standing on the beach and the camera spinning around him while he goes, "Oh God, oh man, oh God, oh man." Like that's like a thing. Like for a while that was like a joke, like a mimetic thing that people would post. And like that is from this movie, and that is very much that sort of scene.
Yeah, and that has been memed, and it's certainly one of my favorite animated GIFs floating around online. There was a point when I was reviewing this movie today and taking notes where I just stopped writing down dialogue that was just off the chain because there is so much of it. Like every scene has just some insane statement that like no person would ever say, which is some of my favorite bad movie writing is when you can really like you're like, oh well, this is a writer with a capital W right here.
It's these monologues about like it's these like world weary monologues about faded glory.
Yeah, and when I went to the IMDb page to check the quotes, I was surprised at how few there are on there, because like I feel like this should have as many like memorable quotes as like, I don't know, like an Indiana Jones movie or something like that, because it is chock-a-block. Like one that I wrote down before I just gave up was my pussy hair was bright gold in high school until I went out and scorched it with the football team. And it's like
classic.
Yeah, we've all been there, sister.
Ladies love to be saying shit like that.
Oh yeah. Or right in the opening scene when Lawrence Tierney says, "Certain dames ought to wear a t-shirt that says, 'Hang around, I'll make a cocksucker out of you.'" And I'm definitely putting that on Redbubble.
Yeah, the obviously the Hauser stuff was the stuff that popped for me the hardest in that, but he's got a lot of like really deranged sex and violence, sort of perversity stuff going on in there, and it feels in the same way that those sort of things are like beyond over the top, like where they're just kind of like
this at a level sort of thing that you need Wings Hauser to really sell this.
Yes, because they are. But I mean, the idea of like writing it and then just like trusting some actor to be like, all right, so you're talking to your son and you're going to say that some dame should be wearing a t-shirt that says, "I'm going to make a cocksucker out of you." Like, so just do that as you would if you were talking to your child, your adult child.
Right.
Like there's not a way to play it. Like it's a crazy fucking thing to write. And you're right that like half of the dialogue in this movie is that.
Yeah. And then the apotheosis of this overheated writing is at the end when Wings Hauser has had a stroke and he's yelling at his wife while he's twisting his face to the side in simulation of somebody who has had like a transient ischemic event, and he tells her, "You got no womb." Which is, oh man, how many guys have said that to me?
Yeah. He's he had a stroke because he got so mad about something that he slammed his head into a door and broke it.
A normal reaction, yeah.
Again, we've all been there. But
average Fox News viewer.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess like on balance, it's like sort of hard to recommend as a movie because of the fact that it is not necessary. I mean, but it's not like a hard watch or anything like that. Like it's strange. It's just not like
it's easy
good.
but unrewarding.
But I think that yeah, exactly right.
Right.
And if that's like the sort of thing you're into, then you will be into this sort of thing. I think just because of the fact that it is so distinctively its own strange product.
Yeah, like a lot of this.
If you want to watch like a hard-boiled noir on like a flight that you don't really want to pay attention to.
Yeah, I mean, well, as far as 80s neo-noirs go, like for me, there's To Live and Die in LA, and then there's this.
Yeah. What's funny with To Live and Die in LA, because that is also a movie that I love. You're being serious, right?
Oh, I absolutely adore it. It's one of my favorite movies of all time.
So I think it's great. But it is also another movie where it is just like a very 80s vision of what like guys do.
Yeah, and it is awesome.
Like, yes.
Cool guys, yeah. I am rolling up the sleeves of my sport coat as we speak.
Yep. And like getting a perm as like part of your duties as a police officer or whatever. Like just a real strange vision of masculinity that was specific to that era. And yet like this is kind of in its way like the other side of that coin, because that was a very like, there's not a lot of talking, there's a lot of like it's like a William Friedkin movie, like there's not and it's not an especially literary one at that. Whereas in this case, it's like there is, action in it, and there's nudity, if not any kind of, actual sex scene that I can recall. But it's like, it's all talking. Like all of the action it's a very much like a writing, exercise in that way, that it is like everything that happens is advanced through people talking and talking and talking.
No, I was going to say, yeah, even a scene where one character has another held at gunpoint, it is so he can describe the scenes that we weren't privy to earlier in the movie.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it kind of reminds, I felt that in this, I believe this is a much better movie, but when I watched Exorcist 3, that's another movie where you're like, oh, this is by a writer / filmmaker. That one was William Peter Blatty, and it's the same thing. It's like it's very talky, and the dialogue is not naturalistic in any way. But in Exorcist 3, you roll with it,
like you say.
In this,
that's like sincerely probably it's my favorite movie that isn't like The Godfather or something.
That's a great movie.
I think it's one of one, and it is, again, very, very much that like not just in terms of the formal expression, and the dialogue is really fascinating in Exorcist 3 because it's like half Sunshine Boys banter and then half long monologues from demonically possessed character actors, but it is there's a vision to it too. I mean, I think that like it's more coherent, and it is, I think, also has a little bit higher moral stakes than this one does. But yeah, that's a good comp. I like that.
Have you seen The Ninth Configuration?
Yeah, I'm pretty much the full. I haven't like watched the weird 60s comedies that he wrote. I'm not gonna, but I'm a very big fan of Ninth Configuration.
I love Ninth Configuration.
Got to that after Exorcist 3, but I think that like for a guy that only made 2 movies as a director, and Exorcist has a lot of shtick in it too. Like the Jack McGowan character, there's a lot of like bants in it, but the movies that he made himself are utterly unlike any other movies that I can think of.
Yes. So
I did see, this was just dumb luck happening across it. I would have always said that Exorcist 3 was visually unlike any other thing. And it's not, I think it still kind of is, but I watched the movie Shock Corridor, and there's a lot of Shock Corridor in the hospital scenes in Exorcist 3.
Yeah.
So Blatty did his homework. Like, I guess he knew how to make movies. It's just like he made them his way, and so they don't feel like anybody else's.
Yeah, and I think that's why like a lot of stuff we discuss on this podcast, like his movies didn't necessarily like hit the first time, and were kind of derided when they first appeared, but then grew in status later. Oh crap, I just completely muffed my point because I can't remember what I was talking about. I was so busy effusing about William Peter Blatty.
Well, it's my fault for jumping in and being like, I also like that movie. I just get excited when people talk about Exorcist 3. It doesn't happen very much.
That's kind of how the show works. So it's, we're not going to ding you for that.
From my paucity of knowledge too, I mean, similarly, the sort of arc of this reminds me a little bit of The Hot Spot, which is another underrated neo-noir that. Yeah, it's very twisty.
That movie owns. And people actually do have sex in that.
Yes. That's basically the whole point of the movie. Everybody's real sweaty and heaving in it. That was a real formative part of my filmmaking education, and also just, burgeoning heterosexuality. It was...
Yeah, I mean, shit, I wish I were torn between Jennifer Connelly and Virginia Madsen.
In a way, I've been torn between them for the entire rest of my life.
A man of taste.
Yeah.
But one thing that I want to go back to about Tough Guys Don't Dance that we touched on briefly was, and because this is a very Wings Hauser centric episode, because hey, he's so big you can't avoid him. He's just right there in your field of vision. You can't.
You got to give the people what they want.
Go
they
around
want to
him.
hear people talking about Wings Hauser.
So this character that he plays, which is like chief of police or something, Regency, Captain Alvin Luther Regency, who is, as we've mentioned, like a violent psychopath, a sex maniac, former Green Beret cop. Watching this time, watching this time, I really was wondering if this isn't just like some weird Mailer parody of like state violence or something. And because the movie is so bizarre, it's really hard to pin down like just what he was getting at. I'm sure he knew exactly what he was trying to convey. It somewhat escapes me. But I mean, really, is this...
Well, it's the negative version of being a violent, oversexed cokehead.
Yeah. But like a soulful, violent, oversexed cokehead.
Right,
Well, and
as
also
opposed to
like...
the authoritarian, oversexed, violent cokehead.
Right, yeah.
Well, and the other thing
it's a thin line.
Is that when this character just kind of slot right into an old episode of Forensic Files, like just some completely sociopathic, like small town police captain who it turned out was actually like dealing coke on the side. Like,
it's like,
who's going to arrest him?
Yeah.
It's like basically it's a cliched character trait. Like it's like as a plot development, you're kind of like, oh, a corrupt cop.
Right.
Who would have thought? And yet at the same time, it is so, as you said, like so outlandish in its expression that it does kind of feel like he's kidding it a little bit, or he's like sincerely a guy that hates cops, which, again, you got to tip your cap when ever you find that in something from the 80s. There really wasn't that much of it.
Well, I feel that
it's putting his like Mailer stamp on the corrupt cop.
Well, that's probably the case because like he certainly was part of the counterculture back during the Vietnam War. He protested it. He was famously arrested protesting the Vietnam War. He was critical of the state and its kind of like handmaidens of violence. There was another episode in his life where I think it was after he wrote the Executioner song, when he started corresponding with a convicted murderer. He took pity on the guy, said that he would vouch for him when he was released, only for the guy to turn around and like immediately murder someone else over something extremely trivial. And if you look...
Hey, this is why pencils have erasers.
Yeah.
Right. And, I think that was a pretty horrifying like episode in his life. He felt really badly that he, stuck his neck out for this guy only for him to, commit a crime. But I think Mailer is someone who would be critical of law enforcement because like how many people are willing to like go that far for like a convicted felon? Like, for the point, like
a kindred spirit, I guess.
Right. And I think Mailer was also fascinated with, jail narratives and stuff like that. Like that definitely comes out in the
violence.
Scene with him, with Ryan O'Neal and Lawrence Tierney. Because Mailer was obsessed with like tests of manhood. And what is more of a test of your manhood than getting thrown in prison?
Yeah. Or, whatever, having to battle it out with someone for the affection of some woman, like there's all that stuff, like all those anxieties and fascinations are very close to the surface in this. I do think that the police character is the most interesting of those because of the fact that it's like, I guess, whatever the John Bedford Lloyd character does also have a lot of those very like kind of like tropey, conflicted, tragic, homosexual, whatever stuff. It's just not, all that shit is dated in kind of an unpleasant way and shaded in ways that it makes it kind of not fun to talk about. Whereas the Alvin Luther Regency character is like typically for this movie and probably also for later Mailer in general is like so overstuffed with pathology that it is kind of like just fascinating to look at. I don't think there's another way to really play a character that is this lavishly evil,
Unhinged,
psychotic, and unhinged.
Yeah, like bringing Ryan O'Neal's character to the police station, then like pouring a drink and lighting a joint.
Yep. And then like telling him some story about a serial killer. This is a bit that I flagged in the story. He tells it, and Brian O'Neal's like, "Why are you telling me this?" Because it. And Hauser goes, "Because it turns me on."
Right.
Because I'm a law enforcement officer, and it turns me on. Which is just like, all right, dude. Like, whatever. Write that shit. Like, I don't have a hard time. It's that,
and
a naturalistic bit, but it was also unnaturalistic when he lit up a J in the police office. So,
yeah, that part I'd forgotten about that part, and it's like amazing. It's this might be one of the greatest ACAB movies of all time.
yes.
Like, James Elroy like thinks he writes like insane cops. This is next level.
Yeah.
And it's Wings Hauser.
Yep. So you know that you're going to be getting 300% of what's on the page, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Another thing about Wingshauser's performance is that when we're getting the explanation of what the crime was that actually went down, I realize there's a point where Ryan O'Neal is no longer in the movie.
Yeah, exactly. Like he disappears from the movie for like a substantial portion of it.
Yeah, that's when it's Wings time.
Right.
Yeah, and
Wings
then
Wednesday.
Yeah, they like get into kind of like the machinations of these
now.
characters, and this is where I started to get really confused. But I don't know, like we can't really.
Part of what confused me too is my only other point of reference is the movie Sophie's Choice, which people know that as Meryl Streep has to make a difficult decision. But if you actually watch the movie, it's Peter McNichol like hanging out with his friends, and Meryl Streep is one of them. Like it's a story about Peter McNichol telling you about his friend Sophie.
Right.
Which is a weird way of like burying the lead. So it's kind of like Ryan O'Neal is like, well, let me tell you about my weird friend Wings.
What is it with guys from the South?
Yeah.
Because in Sophie's Choice, like that character Stingo was a Southern boy, like confounded by these New York Jewish types or whatever. Like and certainly like Tough Guys Don't Dance like made me wonder about like Mailer's experiences with people from the American South, because he seems to have some kind of weird axe to grind against them.
Yeah, they're all hypocritical sex addicts and sort of sociopaths. So again, everybody in the movie kind of is, but there is that. I always feel like with that affectation for like men of letters of this generation, that it is kind of, it's like just borrowing some like Faulknerian grandeur and like hanging some Spanish moss off a tree or whatever is just like a way that you signify that something is literary and significant in that way, that like it wouldn't really seem like a story if there wasn't somebody that was like, Yoknapatawpha County, we did things a little bit differently and much slower, like that's just like what they thought like a book was.
Right.
It's different. William Styron and Norman Mailer are incredibly accomplished writers. I don't make it seem like they didn't know what they were doing, but I do feel like that little bit of shading is designed to like sort of clue the reader or the viewer in that you're like seeing a specific type of story.
Right. And
there's that writing that sounds like writing.
Yes.
In my opinion.
And there certainly seems to be something in there about like social climbing versus like old money, because Tim, Ryan O'Neal's character, went to school with the weird Southern guy, and it appears to have been like a upscale like boys like boarding school or something. But that's the thing is
sort of homoerotic undertones.
Yeah, all of this stuff is just like or something because I don't know what Mailer is trying to tell me when he brings it up. I'm like, okay. Oh, and then that's another great line when that weird Southern guy, Wardley Meeks, when he's about to kill himself on the beach in front of Ryan O'Neal, he says, "Will you take my pride and joy into your mouth?" It's like, I don't know, man. Like,
you want me to borrow your car?
Yeah. Yes, I will borrow your boat.
And Tim, just as an aside, that scene totally made me think of the campfire scene in Truth or Dare, Critical Madness. Except nobody cut out his own tongue, but near as damn it.
But it does have a feeling of, I mean, there's a lot of that in this movie. The Wardley character being maybe the most, if you can see what Mailer is driving at most clearly through the Hauser character, it is the one that, like the ultra tropey gothic Southern homosexual guy.
Yes.
Is like, I don't know what he was driving at there necessarily, other than like a vision of masculinity to counterpose with all the other visions of masculinity on display in here. But it is like, it again sort of shaded towards parody, but in a way that I don't understand what he's parodying. You know, like,
my good sir, am I a joke to you? Like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. Like, look at what you're wearing.
Yeah, this whole aspect of the movie has me thinking, like, I don't know, do I need to like be up on kind of like the literary feuds of like the cognoscenti of the time to understand what this is about? Like what even is this? But I mean, it's entertaining. I'll give them that, even though this was the point in the plot where I was just like, I have no idea like who's dead. Like,
yeah,
and who killed who.
The blonde killed the blonde to get the money that they didn't have.
Yeah, I watched the movie 2 times. Watched it once over the course of like just sort of starting it late at night, and then got too late and I finished it the next day. And it is basically, when I watched it all the way through, after that, it held together as this. That like basically the first 45 or 50 minutes of it are decently coherent.
Mm-hmm.
And like identifiably a movie, and then after that it just breaks down into a series of strange scenes.
Yeah, like you're kind of on an even keel when Ryan O'Neal is writing in shaving cream on the bathroom mirror.
Yeah, totally normal scene.
Very normal.
We can all agree.
Yeah, then it gets weird.
Time.
But yeah, it seems like they're driving towards, like, they set up the problem and the situation, and it seems like it's working towards not a resolution and like the viewer understanding what's going on, and then like eventually you do get it, but it doesn't. You get it because there's like a 25-minute flashback with a ton of voiceover. Like, it does not organically develop in that way.
Yeah, let me just show you all the scenes that would have been at the beginning. You had this been like a conventional movie.
Yeah.
But if you'd done that, like, why would you pay attention?
Amazing. But I guess we might as well talk about the ending, because I'd forgotten what the ending was like. In fact, I was like, I don't remember how this whole mess ended. And it ends on a quote unquote, it has like a quote unquote happy ending, because Ryan O'Neal ends up with his true love, Isabel Rossellini, in a house that she bought with the $2 million worth of drug money that her insane husband had squirreled.
Yeah,
who she murders.
Yeah.
Yeah, after they kill the stroked out Wings Hauser, and she's like, "Oh, I also found a bag of money."
Right, and
that's just tight plotting.
And the thing is that they really hang a lantern on this by having them approach the house, walk into the house, they're happy together, but the score definitely does not think that this is a happy ending, and to the point where it's ridiculously heavy-handed, where it's like, this is bad, and it's like, okay, and then it ends.
Yep.
And you're like, what the fuck did I just watch?
Yep.
I mean, that their fashion completely changes to like, cutting edge 80s like high fashion.
Yeah, like Isabella Rossellini's perm.
Yeah. But it is a weird, again, another example of kind of like a grand gesture that is impossible to interpret, because it has that, like, yeah, they're shading it. Obviously, this is not, like, it's not a happy ending. It is like, maybe the sort of way that, like, sometimes with Lynch movies, that there's like a strong indication that something is in fact a dream or some character's fantasy. It has that sort of like tonal shading to it. And yet again, it's like, to what end? Like, what is your point? Like, I get the idea that this was all like, so it was all a dream, and now they're, completely ascending into this sort of like 80s nuclear family, fantasy thing. But again, like, I don't think that he was effectively satirizing any of the stuff that was being shaded at. And so the idea of like putting this big smug button on it at the end is kind of like, all right, dude, like, if you think you nailed this one.
I think his point is clear that, tough guys, you see, they don't dance.
Oh yeah. At the end of the day, they truly did not dance.
Yeah. And the thing is that, right. And pretty recently before this, there has been a scene of our main character and his dad like dumping several bodies into the ocean while having a philosophical conversation. And certainly this isn't the first time while watching this movie where I was like, oh, this is camp at this point. This movie is, if there's such a genre as man camp, this is it. Because it's definitely not your regular everyday camp. Like, this isn't like a Paul Morrissey film. It's a Norman Mailer film, but it is very campy.
Yes, it is.
But
and it's a good distinction too, because there is, when you think of that, especially the sort of camp that was getting made at that time, like, this is so stridently heterosexual that it winds up being campy, as opposed to like kind of kidding things in like a John Watersy type of way. This is like, what if it was the exact opposite of that?
Yeah, like a roughly contemporaneous example would be Heathers, and which has the "I love my dead gay son" scene. And even though that movie centers around like a kind of cursed heterosexual romance, like you can queer that pretty easily. You can also queer this movie pretty easily, but in that way where like you never know if the movie is just going to punch you for doing it,
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's what Wardley's character is about, that kind of final moment of vulnerability where it's like, he has to kill himself, but only after asking another man to hug him.
Yeah.
Like that's
the
a death
final
sentence.
Defeat.
Yeah.
Like, is that
admitting
really
that you want the other guy to blow you, asking for a hug, and then be like, all right, well,
I don't know what to
really
dude.
nowhere to go from here. Yeah.
But yeah, like, is that really what it comes down to? Is this really about like wounded men at its heart, and like
it may not know it, even if it is.
I guess, yeah.
I think it is, but I also don't know what it has to say about that. But it definitely does have that sense of it being like, the masculinity in it is all deranged in different ways and self-destructive in different ways.
Yeah, because there's not one but two like sort of ambiguously gay husbands in this.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's a kind of a lot of sexual perversity for something that was like, not a studio production, but a canon one. Yeah, there's like a lot of extreme cuckolding, and like it has a real kind of in its in the lavishness and specificity of its derangement, it actually feels very contemporary in that way. That like most people have to, in 2024, have to watch 10,000 hours of pornography to get as insane about this stuff as Mailer apparently just was.
He's an expert in the field.
Yep. This is like a natural talent.
Coomer's lineup. We've got a really special one for you tonight. I guess that unpacks it slightly. It's still an incredibly confounding movie. I don't know if either of you has anything else that you want to highlight about Tough Guys Don't Dance from 1987. I believe it's still on streaming, so check your devices.
I think that we've covered most of the stuff that I found most interesting about it. I think that like I guess just to sort of underline the point that we just made, like it is fascinating because of the fact that it is like, it seems like sort of hitting the mark that it was intended to hit in terms of like authorial intent. It's just a very strange mark, and so it's very hard to sort of catch. But in the same ways that, you know, there's the that distinction between like fiascos and failures. Like it's a fiasco. Like it is the sort of thing where it's like it's a strange vision, more or less executed as I think it was designed to be executed.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like a truly weird vision to kind of like get your head around.
Yeah, it's not.
They understood the assignment.
Yes, but at the end of the day, they truly did.
Yeah, it's not a case of like, oh man, people just didn't like properly grok this movie when it came out. Like actually, if you rewatch it, it's like for example, like recently on the show we covered Ken Russell's biopic of Valentino, which I think is absolutely a film that people were just too dumb to get at the time, or too homophobic or whatever, and should be rewatched. This movie, not so much. I would maybe recommend it to people whose brains are as broken as mine and Tim's are.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you if you can't get it up for like the usual shit,
yeah,
try this brand of block.
Yeah, if you aspire to pal around with someone like Norman Mailer, then yeah.
Like if you wanted to hang out inside the mind of the like really one of the peak divorce artists of his time.
He's
just spend some time around his various derangements.
Yeah, he's like a whole different flavor of wife guy, let's put it that way.
Yep. Just a serial wife guy.
He's ex-wife guy.
Yeah, he's an ex-wife guy. That's exactly right.
But yeah, Tim, do you have anything?
No, I mean I had my interjections. That's it.
You're just overawed by the sheer masculine power of Wings Hauser.
It's
as were we all.
Right. Yeah. It's a bonkers movie that almost works.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's like about the highest praise I think you can give it in earnest.
Yeah.
Agreed. David, is there anywhere where people can check out some of your very excellent writing? Not at all penis-brained.
Great question. Yeah, I'm a normal guy. I have a brain.
I have a brain in my head.
Everybody listen to me talk for 90 minutes definitely knows how normal I am. The defector.com is the website that I work at, and I own it with 23 odd other people, and I think it's a good website. So that would be the one to check out. Podcast wise, I do The Distraction with Drew McGarry, which is kind of the Defector's house podcast. And then I do It's Christmas Town, which is a Hallmark movie podcast with Jeb Lund.
Ooh, that sounds piquant. I will have to check that out.
They're not that great, but the podcast is good. The movies themselves, you really gotta. I've done a lot of damage to my ability to discern what is and isn't good over the course of the years of watching Hallmark movies for that pod.
Oh God, Tim and I totally have that problem now.
Yeah, I was doing a trivia night, and one of them was whether the Hallmark movie title was real or made up.
That's a good series of questions. I like that.
It's a really tough one.
Yeah, there's a lot of them especially the titles often have very little to do with the film too. Like I think that they just like realized that some people like Jane Austen stuff, so they'll be like Sense and Sensibility and Spaniels, and like the plot has nothing to do with Sense and Sensibility. It's just like a vet falling in love, but they're just gonna whatever.
Not a
Let's go
single
for it.
empire waits to be seen because they're not that
Oh.
flattering, to be honest.
Oh, it's all just like soap opera actors smiling at each other,
Yeah, that's people's comfort food. So, and I can't really talk any shit. I just talked for an hour and a half about tough guys don't dance.
Yeah, I was gonna say no innocent parties here.
No. But yeah, thank you, David, very much for your time. This was really fun.
Hey, thanks for having me. Thanks for watching this strange movie and talking to me about it. I feel like this is one of those things I've just been walking around with the experience of having watched this movie for months and not having an outlet for it. So I feel a lot better now.
Well, more
one of
people...
those traumatized experiences that we have to just share with other people.
Yeah. This is how we heal and grow.
Also, more people need to learn the good news about Wings Hauser.
Yes. So if we've done nothing else here today, then at least no one's going to be prepared for the shape and size of his head. It is truly remarkable.
It's a paint can.
It is. It's amazing. They just don't make them like that anymore.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, you can show your support by going to patreon.com/haveyouseen this and make a pledge at the $2 or $5 tier. $5 a month gets the latest episode before everyone else, plus access to our Discord where we're always arguing about movies. If you'd like to give us a tip, our Ko-Fi link is in the show notes.
Will you take my pride and joy into your mouth?